Today's the first episode of a new program that we're going to be bringing you here on Crowdsource the Truth. I'm bringing back a guest who many people may recall, Brian Vukadinovich. Brian, of course, is a pro se advocate. Brian is not a lawyer, but he's going to join me to discuss people's rights, and so we can understand what options are available to us in pro se litigation, and also just to examine the concept of lawfare in general. We've named this new show the Counterlawfare Report with Brian Vukadinovich. And Brian, why don't you give everybody a little bit of background on you again, maybe for some of the people who missed your first two appearances on the show. I was fascinated with your ability to take control of the legal mess that the police there in your county tried to put you in. Just give us a real brief overview of how you've acted as your own advocate and a pro se defendant and plaintiff in legal cases. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Brian? Brian, you got me?
Yes, I can hear you barely, Jason.
Okay, I'm not sure what happened. We did a little test earlier and the sound was okay, but now you're almost completely unable to hear me. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we'll be okay. I can hear you enough. I'm sure it's on my end here, not on yours.
No problem. So I was just telling everybody that this show is going to be an ongoing series where we're going to explore different legal cases and basically corruption within the civil and criminal justice system in the United States. And for people who might have missed your first two appearances on the show, can you give us just a little background on you and how you got into your pro se advocacy?
Yes. Well, just a little background about myself. I'm a teacher. I'm a retired teacher in Indiana. And I was a teacher and a basketball coach, and for many years. And then at some point, there started to be some developments that happened in my life. It started in 1981 with a false arrest in Valparaiso, Indiana, at a bank, which we talked about on an earlier show, where I was falsely arrested. Police were called, and the bank personnel called the Valparaiso Police Department because somebody was in the bank parking lot causing a problem. And the police appeared, and for some reason, I was with my mom inside the bank, and then for some reason, they just panicked and rushed to judgment, and for some reason thought it was me, and physically attacked me in the bank and put me against the wall and roughed me up pretty good. And the bank people and my mom were trying to figure out what was going on and so forth, and trying to get them off of me, but they wouldn't do it. And then at some point they realized they had the wrong person, and then rather than just apologize and let me go, they went ahead and hit me with a charge, basically to cover themselves for what they had done. And then to make a long story short, we went to court, and the judge in the case in Valparaiso, his name was Judge Bryce Billings, he found me not guilty of the charge, and he chastised the police for falsely arresting me and told them that they should have just apologized and let me go. And they were very upset about that. And then there was an out-of-court settlement from that because of the false arrest and the brutality from it. And the Valparaiso police chief at the time, his name was Richard Buchanan, he made a public statement in the newspaper that he wasn't happy with the out-of-court settlement. He said that his department wasn't given its day in court and so forth, and just basically complained and was essentially trying to cover up for his basically wrongful acts by his own police.
Wow.
And then after that, the same officer again, his name was Buddy Collins, William Collins, Buddy Collins by nickname, saw me again and stopped me and roughed me up pretty good, put me on top of his police car, which he denied that he did. This was in the Wiseway parking lot in Valparaiso. And then one of the employees at the store saw this happening, and she came forward and refuted his report and his charges. And she testified under oath that she saw him slamming me against the hood of his car. So then in the end, to make a long story short again here, the charges were dismissed in Judge Billings's courtroom, and then uh, uh, and then the episode just continued on. And by the way, in that particular case, several officers were also called to the scene, Valparaiso officers, and they handcuffed me and put me in the back seat of their squad car with a police dog, a German Shepherd, just literally inches away from my face, growling at me. My hands were handcuffed behind my back, so I was just helpless. I was defenseless. It was a very scary situation, to say the least.
Now, Brian,
So
buddy,
this is Officer Collins here
yeah,
in the orange shirt with the camera around his neck there, and he had been gotten in trouble with the department in the past for filing false police reports. He was actually demoted for that, for a police officer filing a false police report, and that's the type of thing that was going on in the Valparaiso Police Department. They were basically accepting that kind of conduct and acquiescing with it.
right.
So then after that, again, actually 10 times total. Numerous Valparaiso officers, whenever they would see me, they would stop me. On one occasion, it was in October of '86. It was 4:27 p.m., and I was stopped by Officer Rick Zentz, at the time was his name. He charged me with well, he stopped. He wouldn't tell me why he stopped me, and I actually tape recorded the conversation because of what had been going on in the past. And I'm asking him on the tape, "Why are you stopping me?" And he wouldn't answer my question. And then here comes numerous police officers, squad cars with their lights on and so forth. It just became. It looked like possibly there was a robbery going on at the bank. It just looked horrible. So then they all gathered around and they were laughing and how they were going to arrest me and having fun with it and so forth. And one of them even made a comment on the tape recording. He said, "Fuck him. I'm going to get the son of a bitch." And then they arrested me again, charged me falsely with driving with the headlights at 4:27 p.m. And then they added some extra charges to it. And then again, same court, Valparaiso, Judge Billings. Judge Billings threw all of the charges out, the nonsense of the charges that they were. And then I should add that when I was at the police station, I asked, I'm sorry,
Didn't say anything.
okay, I'm sorry. And then at the police station, I asked why I was being arrested. Then I asked the jailers at the jail, "Why am I being here? Why am I being charged?" And they said, "Well, we don't have all the information in here yet." So then here comes Zentz about an hour later, and he adds a ticket, a speeding ticket. No, I'm sorry, driving with no headlights on at 4:27. So obviously that was a bogus charge that was thrown out of court. It was just a reason that they were able, that they made up so they could have a reason to stop me.
Right.
So that was thrown out of court. And then about 2 weeks later, I believe it was on November 3rd, 1986, the same officer, Rick Zentz, sees me again in almost the same place on Roosevelt Road in Valparaiso, and he stops me. I was coming home from work as I was the earlier time when he arrested me for the headlights nonsense. And I asked him again, "Why are you stopping me?" And he told me, "Get out of the car. I want to see your driver's license," and all of those things. And I was only a few blocks away from home, so I told him, I said, "Look, I'm tired of all of this nonsense. I'm going home." So I went home, and in the meantime, he'd been on the radio getting his friends from the Valpo PD, telling them that he had me again. And then they met me at my house, several Valparaiso police cars, and beat me up pretty good in my yard, in front of my mom, my brother, my neighbors.
It's
Open
crazy.
daylight, everybody sees what's going on. And then roughed me up really, really good, put me in the back seat of a squad car, and this Ronald Kermis, Valparaiso officer, he gets on my back. My hands are handcuffed behind my back, and he's got my face into the seat. I can't breathe, and he's got his knee jammed into my back. I thought I was going to die.
Wow.
And then they take me, now rather than taking me to the jail, as is a normal procedure, first they take me to the Valparaiso Police Department so they could have some more fun with me there. So they take me in there, push me around pretty good, make a lot of derogatory comments and so forth. And then they end up taking me to the jail. And again, I'm asking them at the jail, why am I here? Why am I being arrested? And then here comes Zentz now with another bogus ticket, a speeding ticket that he forgot to put in the packet because he realized that he never really had a reason to stop me. So in addition to these other nonsense charges such as resisting arrest or whatever, he sticks that in my packet, and then the Valparaiso PD go to the courthouse in Valparaiso in Judge Billings' court, and Judge Billings throws them out of his courtroom. He tells them he's had enough of their nonsense. He doesn't want to see any more filings against me in his courtroom. So he throws them out on their ears, and rather than just letting the matter go, they drove to Portage, which is a considerable distance away from Valparaiso in Porter County, and then they filed the bogus charges in Portage. So then at some point we have a hearing for information, for discovery information. And we had Michael Barton on your show here just about a week ago or so, where Michael Barton was charged with some a charge that he was contesting, and we learned on the show that Michael was being deprived of information in his case, where the prosecutors weren't willing to give him information such as a video recording of the arrest.
Right.
Well, in my case, I was demanding information. The prosecutor was not very willing to come forward with the information, and I knew that there had been several letters that were written about me between the Valparaiso PD, officials in Porter County, the sheriff, Tim McCarthy at the time, and law enforcement agencies in the adjoining county, in LaPorte County, where they were talking about how they were going to set up a plan to in concert to be able to get me somehow and get a conviction against me, which was their goal. So I asked for all of those documents, and the prosecutor in the case, her name was Nancy Vadic. She is now unbelievably so, the chief judge of the Indiana Court of Appeals. I couldn't believe that they appointed her to that position, because she outright lied, and I have it on the transcripts in the criminal proceeding in Portage. When I asked that those letters be produced to me, the judge asked her to respond, and Vadic told the judge that there were no such letters, that basically she was trying to imply that I was blowing smoke and so forth. And then the judge said to me, Judge Mary Harper, actually a very good judge, very fair judge, she said to me, well, Mr. Vukadinovich, if the state says they never wrote any letters, there are no such letters written by any law enforcement officials, I can't order them to produce something that they say doesn't exist. So I told Judge Harper that they were lying. And I told her that I would prove their lies at the trial, and I asked her for some subpoenas. She gave them to me. I subpoenaed all of these law enforcement officials who I knew had written letters about me. And then, lo and behold, the day before the trial, Judge Harper held a probable cause hearing, and she determined that there was no basis either in law or in fact to stop me, to detain me, or to arrest me. Those were her rulings, findings in her order.
Now, Brian,
So,
let me slow you down for a second.
It just kept going on. It just kept going on and on and on.
Okay, let me slow you down for a second, because I know we're having a little technical issue. You can't necessarily hear me as well as we would like, and that's a major problem. But I want to keep up with you because I want to share images of some of these people. Now, this is Judge Mary Harper, correct?
Yes, she is currently the circuit court judge in Porter County in Valparaiso, Indiana.
And this is a very fair
good judge, I might add.
Fair judge, good judge. Yes, we're not here to just call people out for wrongdoing, but one of the things I would really like for us to be able to do here on the Counterlawfare report is to report on some of the things that you're talking about. Like you're describing things that police officers in Valparaiso obviously know very well that they can easily get away with. They can give you summonses for things that you didn't do. They can beat you up in the jail cell and say you were resisting arrest. They can put pressure on you as they're putting you into their car. And you know, we've heard about this happening all over the country. It's very important that there are checks and balances against those that would uphold the law so that it's clear that they can't get away with this kind of stuff. And even though the mainstream news may not be reporting on it, this is one of the unique things we can do with Crowdsource the Truth. You and I can spend an hour each week examining not just your case and your history, but any cases that come up where there are abuses in the civil and criminal justice system. And this is a really important show, Brian, because our justice system is important to everyone, irrespective of who the president might be, who's got a secret server in their bathroom, or any of this type of day-to-day stuff with the Saudi prince assassinating journalists or whatever might be going on. We all still want to know that we're going to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, and that we can rely on the justice system to actually receive justice. So I'm very hopeful that some of the things that we're talking about will have an impact. Now, this guy, is his name Buddy Williams? Buddy Collins. He's still on the Valparaiso police force. This is a major problem because he's obviously a guy who feels like he can do whatever he wants. And frankly, I think having a police officer like that is possibly even more dangerous than a common criminal on the street. Because this police officer could have murdered you in the jail cell, could have said that you were resisting arrest, have another officer corroborate that, and boom, case closed, you're in the ground, and that's it. The guy goes on to continue to do that sort of thing. So now, you mentioned a judge who you said out and out lied. Let's take a look at that judge. Who was that?
Well, she was a prosecutor at the time. She is now the chief judge of the Indiana Court of Appeals. Her name is Nancy Vadic.
How do I spell Vadic?
Yeah, and she basically was protecting the unlawful conduct that she knew was taking place in the Valparaiso Police Department. She was actively involved in the situation of trying to keep that information away from me that I knew was there, and it's just ridiculous what's going on, and that's her right there. I just rolled over and laughed when I heard that Nancy Vadic was going to be the chief judge of the Indiana Court of Appeals. But that's a problem that we have in the country.
Yes.
What's happening is people. I mean, we all know what happened in the Laquan McDonald shooting in Chicago. What happened in Ferguson, Missouri. It's happening all over the country. We have rogue cops, and let me add, the majority of the police are very good people, but we definitely have a lot of infected police that need to be cleansed out of the system. And when we have prosecutors such as Nancy Vadic at the time, who was essentially protecting that type of unlawful conduct, our country's in trouble.
Absolutely.
And our country's in further trouble when the politicians of our country put those kinds of lawyers and prosecutors on the judiciary, whether it be state or federal. Here they are now, after they were involved in acquiescing to unlawful police activities. Here they are now sitting in judgment of police officers. That's a big problem that we have in the country.
Exactly, and it's a problem that I hope you and I will be able to address, at least in part. And by having this Counterlawfare report, we're going to be calling out judges and lawyers and whoever might be abusing our criminal and civil justice system here in the United States. So, Brian, let's start with Nancy Vadic. You've got evidence that is proof that she lied in court. What can we do as citizens of the United States to report this to whoever is in charge of deciding if she's a judge or not?
Okay, well, what we can do now, first of all, let me completely verify. I have the absolute evidence. I have the transcript where she made those statements in open court, and I actually quoted her statements in my book. They're all in there. Everything I'm saying here I can verify. And what we can do as a country is we can keep track. We should be keeping track of, first of all, we should start out with respect to the federal judiciary. Those positions are nominations. They're political nominations. And if you really look closely, most of the federal judges that are appointed come from the government sector. Very few federal judges are appointed who are civil rights lawyers in their profession. They seem to pick judges that come from the corporate sector of America or from within the prosecutorial section, state's attorneys and so forth, federal prosecutors, and United States attorneys and so forth. So what we end up is, instead of getting judges that have actually been on the other side defending people's rights, we end up with judges who have a history, a background of actually doing what they feel they could do at the time to actually just look the other way and put people in jail. How many people have we seen and read about here within the last just few months who have been wrongfully incarcerated? I just read an article just a few days ago. There was a guy that was in jail and prison for 23 years.
Wow.
And then they, because of the DNA evidence that we have now available, it was determined that he was wrongfully convicted. He spent 23 years of his life. Now, what happened to that prosecutor and those police officers that falsified information to have him spend 23 years in jail? What happened to them? I'm a very strong advocate that we should have an eye for an eye law in this country. In other words, if a person is brought, his charges are brought by a corrupt officer, and he just takes his charging information sheet out and he writes lies down so he can put somebody in jail wrongfully just because he doesn't like them, for whatever reason that might be. And then the prosecutor plays along with that and doesn't want to give evidence to the defendant and so forth. And then we find out 23 years later that was an innocent person. He should have never been charged in the first place. How come those people that were involved in this, why aren't they in jail? I believe there should be an eye for an eye law. If somebody spends 23 years of his life in jail on a wrongful conviction, and it's determined, there's evidence that the police officer lied, and the prosecutors played along with it, they should be required to spend 23 years of their life in jail. And not being able to retire and get a pension and live life merrily on as they do. There should be an eye for an eye law. Fair is fair. But this is what's happening. Until we decide as a country to actually demand justice, these are the things that are going to continue to go on. We'll have judges like Nancy Vadic in charge of courts. Well, and there's plenty of them in addition to her.
Right.
It's just ridiculous. And the citizens in this country deserve better.
So, Brian, let's start to identify some plans like letter writing or email campaigns where we can identify some of the people around the country that we know are engaged in this type of wrongdoing, and not to pursue them. We don't want people to directly contact, definitely don't want anyone to harass, but we want to explore what our rights are as citizens as far as providing this evidence to the people who are in charge. We've got to get this corruption out of our justice system, and obviously if we've identified these individuals who are still in the police departments and still in the judicial systems doing these things, and we can show evidence, we need to bring it to the attention of those that can really take some action and reconsider whether these people should be judges, whether they should be police. And then the hope is, if you and I can do this effectively over the course of the next, let's say, couple of years, maybe we can start to actually have an impact. And when some of the, look, they always say, a fish stinks from the head, right? So if all of Buddy Collins' subordinates see him, just writing up a ticket for you, beating you up in the back of the car, they figure, hey, this is the way it goes. We can do whatever we want. But if Buddy Collins instead is himself brought up on charges and put in jail, perhaps some of the subordinate officers will realize that that's not the right thing to do. And as you've said, I also believe that the overwhelming majority of law enforcement officers, whether they're local police, FBI, whatever, I think the overwhelming, high 90s percentage-wise, the overwhelming majority of the people that are going into this field are doing it for the right reasons, but frequently people who are in positions of influence at the top, as we've seen with Andrew McCabe, James Comey, Robert Mueller, these individuals are corrupt, and they're easily able to identify the lower rung people who want to participate in that corruption, speed them through the process, bring them to the top, and allow them to basically perpetuate this corrupt activity. And as you've just identified, they know which judges, they know how to manipulate the system, get some friend in another county to bring charges against you or whatever. So we need to be vigilant, and we need to be basically the oversight for this type of activity to prevent it from happening, and to use the law, to use the legal system to prevent this type of lawfare. So let's define that term just a bit more, Brian, because lawfare, it can be done by anyone, really. When the police do things within their police powers to get you under their thumb, to throw you in a jail cell, and to get you in a corner where you've got to defend yourself, that's a form of lawfare, of course, and our friend Michael Barden is facing that right now.
Oh, you're absolutely right on every point that you made. What we need in the country, we need, first of all, it has to be done orderly. And as you said, we don't want anybody doing disruptive things, illegal things, things that will look bad. We want everything done orderly, and we do need a grassroots effort in this country. I'm firmly convinced we can do that. I have to commend the students from Parkland, Florida, who went through the disaster that they went through, and how they organize themselves and are affecting change in the country on their end. And they're a great example for us adults, the students from Parkland, I might add. But you're right. What we need to do is, excuse me.
No problem.
I'm sorry, my phone was ringing. Problem. I didn't want to interrupt him. Now, what we need to do is have people should keep an eye on things that are going on in their community with their police. Now, let me give you an example. Buddy Collins, we know, filed a false police report. He should have never been on the department after that. He should have been fired for that.
Yeah.
I believe they suspended him or demoted him. But when you have a police officer who has definitely filed a false police report, you can't have that officer in the department anymore. He should be gone.
Yeah.
Rick Zentz, the other officer that I talked about, an example of one out of Valparaiso, and I can't believe that the people stood for it. He was found on the side of a state highway, early morning hours. Rick Zentz is his name. He had a beer between his legs. He had a gun right next to him, and he was passed out. A truck driver found him, called the sheriff's department, Porter County Sheriff's Department. They came. They didn't arrest him. They took him home.
Wow.
And the captain of the Porter County Sheriff's Department, his name was William Joel at the time, he publicly stated in a newspaper that it was, quote, honor among police. It's ridiculous.
It is.
What's going on. And then I can tell you this, there were numerous officers. It wasn't just me getting beat up by the Valparaiso PD. There were numerous claims made against the Valparaiso PD by several officers. There were other lawsuits filed. There were claims made. And I list them all in the book. And all of these guys went on as if nothing was happening. The department, the city of Valparaiso allowed that to happen. In fact, in one occasion, Rick Zentz and one of his friends from the department, his name escapes me, he was another Valparaiso officer, they took a lady, to his apartment, Zentz's apartment in Valparaiso, and put a gun to her head.
Whoa.
And told her that if she didn't tell them what they wanted to know, they were going to blow her head off.
Wow.
It's in the records.
Brian, I'm looking for this guy, Rick
but
Zentz.
Nothing happened. He didn't get fired for that.
I can't find this guy, Rick Zentz. Hang on. How do I spell Zentz?
Z-E-N-T-Z.
Okay. So when I put in Rick Zentz, Valparaiso Police, I'm getting nothing. When I put in Rick Zentz Police, I'm having a really hard time finding this guy.
The other officer's name was First. Robert First was the one with Zentz when they put the gun to the lady's head. And I believe I gave you an article before about when Zentz was found on the side of the state road, drunk out of his head, passed out.
Yeah. It's weird that that article's not turning up. Robert First, Valparaiso Police. Troubled cop kills himself. Is that him? Yes. Wow. So he killed himself.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the Valparaiso PD at the time was about as corrupt a police department that you could imagine. I mean, the level of the corruption and what the city of Valparaiso was allowed. You know, if you just look at all of the complaints that were filed from people, I mean, they were beating people. One of them, they beat a person. He had his pregnant wife. I believe his name was Whistler, Donald Whistler. He had his pregnant wife with him in the car, and one of the Valparaiso officers, can't remember his name, but I believe Whistler was the person with his pregnant wife. He beat him to a pulp in his car, and then they took both of them to jail and charged both of them, and then they ended up dropping the charges against the pregnant wife. And these were the things that were going on in Valparaiso, and I was trying to address those things, but the mayor of Valparaiso, the lawyers for Valparaiso, the prosecutors, they were all, pretty much, it's a very corrupt system, and that's why things are as bad as they are. And it goes on everywhere. It's a problem all across the country.
Yeah.
So people need to watch what's going on. They need to, when judges are up usually in the states, what the people can do is they seem to have a habit when they go into the voting booth. They'll see a judge, and those judges are basically they're retentions, where you just vote yes or no. Most people they'll just say yes. No, they really don't know too much about the judges, and that's a mistake. They should actually do research on how judges have ruled on issues in the past, and go into a voting booth and actually vote no against judges. But federal judges, when they're appointed, people should get a hold of their United States Senator, because the United States Senator in each state makes the recommendation to the president. So when those names are publicized, usually there'll be 3 names that are publicized, and then the people can then take a look at their record, and then they can contact their United States Senator and say, hey, look, we don't want this guy on the federal judiciary. We don't want somebody who constantly rules in favor of corporations and government agencies. We want you to pull that name. We don't want that person. That's something that people can do. People can write letters to the editor and voice their opinion. They can voice how things are going on in their community. They can voice in their community in letters to the editor about why are the police doing things that they shouldn't be doing. The Valparaiso police, for example, opened up an illegal bar in Valparaiso, and actually ended up getting in trouble with it after the citizens of Valparaiso started complaining about it, wanting to know how come they were able to have that bar and get away with the things they were. It was very loud. People were complaining, and they just looked the other way. It was some kind of an organization, Fraternal Order of Police or something like that in Valparaiso.
Wow.
But they pretty much do whatever they want because they're unchecked. But people can call their mayors or congressmen or state representatives, write letters to the newspapers and so forth, demand meetings, come to public meetings, voice their concerns. But if they would do that, then we could affect some change in the country. But it's hard to get people to do that because they're afraid. And they shouldn't be afraid, but they are.
Well, beyond being afraid, I think there's a lot of people who probably feel like they want to do things like that, but they're just not sure where to begin or how to proceed. And I definitely want the Counterlawfare report, the show that you and I have created right here, to become a resource for people where when they become aware of this type of corruption, perhaps they could be in communication with you or I, and we could provide some advice as far as who they could contact and what they could do. And to that end, I want to let everybody know that they can find you, Brian, on Twitter, and you are at Motion for Justice on Twitter, so people should be following Brian. Brian is a vast resource of legal knowledge, and Brian's not a lawyer. He can't represent anyone, and we aren't giving legal advice here. We're just exploring what people's rights are. We're giving our own personal commentary on facts and evidence as we see them. And I also want to remind people that they can purchase Brian's book. It's called Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case. And it just came out in June of this year. You can get it on Amazon in hardcover. And this is going to go into great detail about all the things that happened to Brian and his battle against corruption within the Valparaiso Police Department and his subsequent lawsuit that he brought against the school board after the corrupt police in Valparaiso got him fired from his job. They're incredibly vindictive, wouldn't you say, Brian?
Absolutely vindictive, very vindictive. It's just sickening. And by the way, let me add to your point there, Jason. Anybody who would like to, I mean, you can message me on Twitter. You can do it publicly if you would like people to, which is actually a good thing, to let people know what's going on. You can do it on the public posting there, or you can message me privately on there if you would like. I mean, I'm very happy. I talk to people all the time who are involved in these things and try to help them as much as I can. So I'll be happy to answer any questions from any of the viewers here. We are going to, I believe, do a very good public resource here with the program that you and I are going to be doing here. And as you said, we're not offering anybody legal advice, but we're offering people a lot of common advice. And certainly from my experience that I went through in dealing with corruption and exposing it, I feel that I could probably help a lot of people with things that are taking place. We need to make this a public awareness thing. I'm not afraid to publicly discuss things that are going on that many people are maybe a little worried or scared to do. I understand that, but if we're going to actually change the forces that we're dealing with this corruption, this political and governmental type corruption, we're going to have to be vocal about it, and we're going to have to be orderly about it. But we need a grassroots effort to do that. And I think with our program here, we can possibly get that started. We need it. It's very important in our country that we do this.
Yeah.
There's just too many people that are getting abused.
Well, and not only that, Brian, but just from listening to you talk right now, it's quite clear that, corrupt police officers become corrupt police commissioners and perhaps mayors and perhaps eventually directors of the FBI. Corrupt prosecutors become corrupt judges. So we really need this grassroots movement. We really need an oversight like this, a program that can examine these things and put legal pressure on people that would do these types of things. So now I was, while you were talking before, I was a little sad to learn that the judge that you first spoke about, Bryce Billings.
Judge Billings?
unfortunately has died. So see, that's another problem. When we have honest judges, some of the things that you're talking about took place in the 1990s, etc. So Judge Billings died at the age of 88 in 2013. So unfortunately, he's not available to people who are in Valparaiso in the criminal justice system hoping for justice. And we know that some of these judge appointments are lifelong appointments, aren't they?
The federal judge appointments are lifetime, yes, correct.
And what do you think about that, Brian?
I think it's a bad thing. I think it's a huge mistake to put federal judges on the bench for life. It's because they know, I mean, let's face it, and they basically don't have any boss. They have no boss. They're their own boss. They can do whatever they want. They set their own hours. They make rulings how they want them, and then if they mess up on rulings, they'll have the appellate judges, who are also lifetime appointments, pretty much cover them as much as they possibly can. And absolutely, how in the world can you justify the intent when the law was made for federal judges to be permanent appointments? The intent was that by giving the judge a position on the federal judiciary for life, was that he would not be beholden to anybody then. Because then if some group got upset or some influential person got upset, they could possibly get him fired or removed from the bench and so forth. This gave him the protection to be able to do, in theory, what's right and not worry about consequence of his or her job. But in the end, it's actually had the opposite effect, because now we put them on the bench for life, and these judges who may have been corrupt judges where they came from now are corrupt federal judges on the bench, and they can't be removed. So they have no incentive to do actually what the right thing is. They continue on and help their corporate friends, their governmental agency friends, and so forth, and the people just basically lose. There should be no... Judge Richard A. Posner, highly distinguished judge of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago, who retired about a year ago because of unfairness issues that were going on that he didn't like in the Seventh Circuit in Chicago. And he has made it very clear. He has publicly stated that it's a bad idea to have lifetime appointments for federal judges. And he was a federal judge himself.
Yeah.
And he is saying, bad idea. There should be some type of age limit.
Yep.
He has suggested possibly 75, somewhere in there, but some kind of age limit, and certainly not life. There's a judge, his name is William Bauer. He's on the Seventh Circuit in Chicago. He's 91 or 92 years old as we speak. That's too old. I'm sorry. There comes a certain point in time, I mean, hopefully all of us are going to grow old and have all of our faculties and so forth. But when you get to be 90, 91, 92 years old, that's him right there. He's actually 92 years old, it says there.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be on the bench. I have to wonder, is he really reading the briefs? At 92, come on, give me a break. So law clerks are doing that. He's getting paid over $200,000 a year. That's the salary of a federal judge. So he keeps making that salary and probably doing much of nothing, actually, in the end. And another thing we should be concerned about as a public, that we should keep our eyes on, is the fact that if you walk into a courthouse, particularly a federal courthouse, and for example, when I had my federal trial in March 2016, my trial was a week-long trial, and there were several other courts in that building, in the federal building in Hammond. There was not one day that I saw any activity whatsoever going on in any of the courtrooms in that building. So I have to wonder, what are these judges actually even doing? Are they even there? I mean, they don't have to sign in and report to work and so forth. So I have a very serious question about how much actual work is being done. But I do know this: the majority of summary judgments that are filed in the country. Summary judgment is a motion when there's, it could be in either state or federal court. When let's say a person sues a government agency or a corporation for a civil rights violation, and then the federal agency or the state agency, whatever the case may be, then their lawyers will file a motion for summary judgment to have the case dismissed without a trial. And the judges love those because all they have to do is sign off and the case is dismissed. It's one less case for them to have to deal with. That's very wrong. And in the federal judiciary, the people of this country have a Seventh Amendment right, Amendment 7 to the United States Constitution, which entitles people to a jury trial in this country. So somewhere along the line, somebody came along and dreamed up this idea of summary judgments. I maintain that summary judgments are against the Constitution.
Wow.
Because the Constitution entitles every person under the Seventh Amendment a right to a jury trial. So how does a judge get to decide that you don't get a right to a jury trial when the Constitution gives everybody that right? Something is very wrong with what's happening in the country. And I can tell you this: after my case was over and I was able to prevail, and I went into a very hostile situation. The judge in my case was the Chief Judge, Philip Simon, very hostile to my case, was very upset because I chose to represent myself, told me I was going to lose, tried to jam a settlement down my throat before the trial, and which I rejected. And then I ended up going to trial and I won a 5-day jury trial, and I got $60,000 more the jury awarded me than what he was trying to jam down my throat. There was only, in the article that was written about my case, it stated that that's him, Judge Simon there. I thought it was completely inappropriate for him to take the position that he did against he was very adamant that on the fact that I chose to represent myself, and wanted to know if I wanted him to get a lawyer to represent me. I didn't want one of his buddies representing me at the trial. I said no. I just rejected it outright. He was upset about it, but that's the way it goes. I just wish people would, and for some reason, people feel like they can't stand up to federal judges because they have that black robe on and so forth. I respect the position, but sometimes we have to have questions about the person that's wearing that black robe. Now, I don't have any animosity from a particular standpoint against Judge Simon insofar as I don't think he's a corrupt judge, but I do believe he's a government-friendly judge, and that's not a good thing. He's supposed to be a fair judge to both sides, and it was very clear to me that he was leaning many things in favor of the public school corporation in my case against me. That was very, very clear.
Right. So let's talk about that for a minute, Brian. So let's talk about Judge Simon, because you've stated that you feel that there should be an age limit for judges. Judge Simon is only 56 years old, so maybe there need to be some additional reforms, because it certainly seems that 56, 60, 70, these are ages that judges can continue to perform very well, but given the knowledge that they can sort of, as you said, do whatever they want with no repercussions, this is very dangerous irrespective of the judge's age. So there should be some sort of oversight, some sort of ability for judges who behave in this way, who try to sway a defendant in a way that is outside of the rule of law. There should be repercussions. There should be a fear that these judges should have, a healthy fear of being removed for wrongdoing and even prosecuted. Right? Can you hear me, Brian? Brian? Can you hear me? Brian, have you still got the sound there? I think you've lost me, Brian. Brian, I think you've lost sound. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you here, Jason.
Okay. So Brian, let's do this. Let's wrap up for today, and then what we'll do is we'll address this sound issue for next week's show. But this is going to be an ongoing exploration into the systemic corruption in the legal system within the United States. People who are interested in learning more about Brian can purchase his book from Amazon.com. The book is Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case. And Brian is going to go into great detail about police corruption that he experienced that put him in danger of being arrested and thrown, or rather incarcerated. And he also details the civil case that he prosecuted against the school board. And if anyone is aware of corruption in their jurisdiction, you can contact Brian by following him on Twitter at Motion for Justice. You can message him on Twitter. And of course, you can always email me at truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org, and Brian and I are in regular communication. We want to help people find ways to fight corruption. We need to be the individual oversight to this type of corruption. And Brian, I promise we'll get the audio issue addressed for next week's show. I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you can hear me, Brian, is there anything you'd like to say in closing before we end for tonight? No. Okay. We'll pick it up next week when the sound is working, okay? Very good. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. This has been the Counterlawfare Report with Brian Vukadinovich, and we will see you. I'll see you tomorrow. Brian will be back with us next week. Thanks for watching, everybody.